Hey guys, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. I'm Kristen and I look up those true stories every week that involve miracles. So I'm going to get into it. Our story for today, listen along, and this is going to be an amazing story and I really think you guys will find it quite miraculous. So here we go. Dan and Debbie Ferguson, they were parents, and one morning they received a terrible phone call that I'm sure every parent out there just never wants to get. And it occurred at 3:50 a.m. in the year of 2016. It was a November night, and of course the parents and the rest of the family were sleeping in their beds when the phone rang. And the parents and the family of this particular story, they lived in Titusville, Florida. So when they got the call, they were getting the call from Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. And the call was in regards to their 18-year-old son, Caleb. Now, a few months prior to this, Caleb had just started university at the Florida State University. So he was getting into that college life. It was an early Friday morning when Caleb had taken his skateboard and he had gone to just the campus Strozer, I believe that's how you pronounce it, Strozer campus library. And he had gone there to print out a term paper that was going to be due the following day. Well, he prints it out, gets everything done at the library, and packs it up and heads back to his dorm room. And he had actually been coasting downhill when he lost control. He flew off backwards, hitting his head on the concrete. When he hit, it knocked him out cold. In fact, blood was oozing from his eyes, ears, and nose. And they said that his body began to seize. So he hit his head so hard that he just started having seizures. Now, looking back, this is the part where his parents, his folks, they say that mysterious little things began to take place, and they refer to those little mysterious things as miracles. But before we get into those little miracles, back to the story, Debbie gets the call, and she says that when she got the call from Tallahassee Memorial, that they made it seem very urgent. They were implying, they didn't say it outright this way, but they implied, she said, that she should hurry, get up there quick because Caleb might pass at any moment. So as one can imagine, his family was just, they were going through an emotional roller coaster at this point. I mean, imagine being woken out of a deep sleep and being told your child, hurry, they could pass at any moment. I can't imagine what that must have been like for them. But they get their things together and they head straight to the hospital as fast as they can. Once they got there, they were told that Caleb had a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. And so they had put Caleb in the neuro ICU. And the doctors themselves were trying to control his brain swelling. So they had to put Caleb on a ventilator and, of course, put him into a medically induced coma. Now, going back to the miracle portion, we're going to talk about the first miracle that occurred, according to his folks. Now, timing in general in life is everything. And I say that because on the way back to the dorm when Caleb's riding on his skateboard, it's early Friday morning. By early, I mean, it's like 2 a.m. around there. And so Caleb actually had been on his cell phone with one of his old buddies back home. And that buddy, his name was Micah Chappell. So they're chatting, he's riding, going back to the dorm. And then that's when the accident occurred. And Micah says that they're chatting 1 second, the next second, it's silence. He hears nothing. And so he's probably calling out, Caleb, you still there? You all right? No answer, just silence. And he said the next thing he heard was just like labored breathing. So obviously, this worried Micah right off the bat. So what Micah does, he calls Caleb's roommate and says, hey, I was talking to Caleb, tells him what happened. So his roommate decides to ping Caleb's phone to try to find the location. He was successful and able to do so. That's when the roommate took off to try to get to that location. And the ping had Caleb just, I guess, in a parking lot, I guess, of sorts. It just said a lot. So by the time the roommate gets to where Caleb is, he says that paramedics were already on the scene. So this was great, so he didn't have to call or try to find out what was going on. Paramedics were already loading Caleb in and trying to get him to the hospital. But the question remains, who called them? Because it wasn't Micah and it wasn't the roommate. The parents didn't know because at this point they're still sleeping back at their home in Titusville. They did find out after the fact that despite it being, like I said, 2 a.m. when Caleb was on his way back to his dorm, there happened to be a girl. It was just a young lady. She's still unknown to this day. No one knows her name, but she had seen the accident occur, apparently. And she found Caleb, saw it happen. Of course, his body season, that whole thing. So she calls on her cell phone to call for an ambulance. Now, the Fergusons themselves, Caleb's parents, they refer to this unknown lady as an angel because had it not been for her, had she not been at that spot at 2 a.m. on that Friday, he'd have laid there forever and he probably would have died. So she really did save his life. Now, back to the hospital where Caleb is. Once his parents arrived in the ER, doctors were talking to them, and there was a quote I found by Caleb's father, Dan, and I guess the doctors kind of relayed this to him. In quote, he says, "It was like he was in a car accident at 70 miles per hour." End quote. So that is how damaging that fall was to Caleb's head. It was like if he was in an accident going 70 miles per hour and bam, which I guess explains the seizing and everything else that was occurring. So due to that horrific injury, his brain needed rest, and another reason he was put into a medically induced coma. Now, as time went on after the accident, his parents say there were plenty of hopeful days, but there were also their fair share of terrifying days. So during all of this, the highs and the lows, his parents, they had to rely on their faith because that's all they had. They ended up making a Caring Bridge site. They made an account. They set it up. That way they could get out word to their family, friends, neighbors, just the updates to what was happening with the care of Caleb. And it was said that there were thousands, literally thousands of people that were starting to follow this progress on Caring Bridge. They wanted to follow up and see how Caleb was doing. A second miracle that kind of took place, his parents say, were the prayers involved during this whole thing. So there was a family friend by the name of Tracy Spears, and she kind of wanted to help any way she could. So she made a Facebook event just to help update people that maybe weren't following the Caring Bridge, but also for one clear purpose, and that was to set aside a date for everyone that wanted to participate to be able to fast and pray. So I'm not sure what that specific date was, but she put it up, set it up into the Facebook event and said, hey, on this date, if you can fast and pray for Caleb's healing, that would be great if you're able to. So there were hundreds that did. It was said that the Facebook event, it was shared over 700 times. So no telling the exact number of how many people actually fasted and prayed for Caleb that particular day, but there were lots. And I mean, a quote from Dan, the father of Caleb, he says, prayer itself was a miracle. He said also that many businesses in the area began to put up signs outside their businesses that said, pray for Caleb. There was even a fundraiser game that was done in honor of Caleb and to help raise funds. And also just letters in general, just poured in, whether it was email or physical letters, they poured in, his family said. And they said that that was one of the most impactful things during this whole time, was seeing the letters, reading them, the support, the prayers they were getting for Caleb. And it just really helped them during this tough time. Now, on to Miracle 3. One day after that fast that a family friend had put on, a miracle happened. Caleb, under heavy sedation, because he's still in a medically induced coma, right? He opens his eyes and he begins to track his nurse. So what that means is, the nurse had come in, she's doing her thing, and he opened his eyes and his eyes are following her around the room, which is a great sign for somebody with a TBI injury. So it actually alarmed her, though. And the reason being, she thought he was coming out of the coma too fast. So I'm not sure the implications of what would happen if somebody comes out of a coma too fast, but she was worried about that. So she actually increased the sedation a little bit. And due to this happening, which is great, the next day they had Caleb in for another CT just to take a look and see what was going on. Now, the results, guys, were unbelievable because after those CT results came back, his brain was normal. I kid you not, a normal teenage boy's brain. No swelling. It was like looking at somebody that never had a traumatic brain injury. And Dan and Debbie, his parents, they say it was like watching a miracle in action because they were there this whole time. They saw all these things happen. In fact, as his parents were in the room during that period, I don't know if it was the same day he got the CT or right there, a day before or after. But either way, they were in the room with him and he opened his eyes again and began to track and follow his parents with his eyes. And his father says, quote, "We believe he was healed Sunday night after the fast," end quote. So at this time, he's keeps opening his eyes under the sedation. So they gradually, after the CT scan came back normal, they just gradually started to decrease the sedation and kind of bring him fully out of that coma. And 2 weeks after the accident actually occurred, Caleb was already breathing on his own. He didn't even need the ventilator anymore. Now, despite these wonderful things and this miraculous thing that is occurring, he still had setbacks. But even though there were setbacks here and there, Caleb overcame them all by the grace of God. Once Thanksgiving had come, they had transported Caleb to the Jacksonville rehab facility. And it was around that time that his family started to get discouraged a little because they had seen Caleb, struggling with little things, but they had also seen, in just a couple weeks, Caleb had lost 22 pounds. So they were just like any parents would be. They were worried. And I mean, those minor things that Caleb wasn't able to do, they were things like tying your, shoelaces. He wasn't able to do that. He wasn't able to bring himself to a full sitting or standing position on his own. He needed help doing those things. And in addition, it said he wasn't able to swallow correctly as of yet. So he was struggling with that as well. But like I said, even though there were these setbacks, he still overcame each one. And the last miracle number 4, Caleb was headstrong. He wanted to be home by Christmas, and he was going to do everything he could to get himself into that position. He worked his little patootie off, doing everything he could to improve. And wouldn't you know it, 2 weeks later, Caleb, no help needed. He walked straight out of that rehab facility. He did go on to outpatient therapy, for continued little things, but he was home by Christmas. And I mean, if you just think of this thing overall, this one accident and his miraculous healing had touched so many lives and people's attitudes, about faith and healing and miracles, because it wasn't just his family and his friends. You remember all those thousands of people on the Caring Bridge site and the Facebook, the fast. So all these people that had monitored and kept up with his progress saw these things occur. And I mean, imagine what that must have done for their faith and their relationship with God. Or maybe they didn't have one and they gained one, just so many great things came out of something that was so tragic. It's just God had higher purposes for Caleb, for his family, and for everyone that monitored his progress and prayed for him during that time. It's just amazing. This is a very, it's a very touching one. I really enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought about it, and have you had any experience before with seeing or hearing of knowing a loved one or a friend coming out of a coma or something similar? I'd love to hear the story. And also, guys, just remember to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys for the next one.